Hello chess fans and welcome to Chess5, and today I'm going to show you the best game played in the chess history and you are going to love this game. The match is between the one and only Garry Kasparov versus Veselin Topalov, and this game was played in 1999 in Nge2 tournament, and this game is going to be the epic game. So without any further ado, let's dive into the game. So Garry Kasparov with the black pieces, Garry Kasparov with the white pieces started with 1 e4, and Veselin Topalov with the black pieces replied with d6. And here, although black is having many options in this position, perhaps e6, perhaps e5, perhaps even c6, but he chose d6. After d6, Garry Kasparov played d4. Here we have knight to f6, developing the piece and also attacking the e4 pawn. So Garry Kasparov played knight to c3. Here we have g6, bishop to e3, and now bishop to g7. And now we are in the king's Indian defense. So after bishop g7, Garry Kasparov played queen to d2. There are two ideas by playing queen to d2. First of all, perhaps white is preparing that when black will do short castle, he will do long castle, and he's going to attack with h4 h5. And the second idea is he's preparing to play bishop h6 and trade the most powerful bishop in the king's Indian defense for black, which will give a very nice position for white. So after queen d2, black played here c6, not going to castle so soon. Black is waiting that whenever white will castle long side, he's going to attack with b5, a5, and perhaps a4 and b5 even. So after c6, here Garry Kasparov played f3, a very nice move. The idea is here the f pawn is first of all protecting the e4 pawn, and now g4 have been also be possible to attack on the king side. So g4 is a very nice move by Garry Kasparov. So after g4, after f3, here Topalov played b5, directly going for the attack to white by playing b5. Here the idea of black is to perhaps play a5, grabbing more space on the queen side, and perhaps even play a4, b4, grabbing more space, kicking the knight from the c3 square, and black would be having a very nice position. So after b5, here white played knight to e2, simply developing the pieces. And after knight e2, black played knight to d7, developing his piece. And after knight d7, white played bishop to h6, going for the main and the key bishop for black. Going to trade the main bishop, which will give white a very nice position. So after bishop h6, black decided to capture the bishop. Here queen into h6, and here black can no longer short castle because queen is covering the f8 square. So after queen into h6, black played bishop to b7, developing his piece, and perhaps the idea could be to develop his queen and preparing for long castle now. So after bishop to b7, white decided to play a3 because there could be some bad ideas by black by playing b4, which will disturb white knight on c3. So that's why a3, a very nice move by Garry Kasparov. And after a3, black played here e5, directly going for the center and trying to open up the center. After e5, white played long castle, simply developing his pieces. And after long castle, here comes queen e7, now preparing for long castle. At the place of queen e7, if Topalov wanted to attack, he could have attacked by playing a5. And the idea is very simple of why black, he wants to play b4 and attack further, but he played queen e7. Perhaps at the place of attacking, he wanted to play positional by playing long castle, perhaps h6, and it's a fine position. So after queen e7, white played king b1, keeping the king safe. Here comes a6, preparing to long castle now. Here comes knight c1, because knight was not doing much on e2, so he decided to maneuver the knight from e2 to c1 and perhaps b3, and the knight square on a5 waiting for the knight on c1. So after knight c1, black decided to long castle. Here comes knight to b3. Here comes e into d4 by black, capturing a pawn. Here white captured the pawn back with the rook, and here comes c5, a very nice move by black. The idea is, there are many ideas. First, the pawn is hitting the rook. Second, black is gaining more space on the queen side. Third, black is opening up the bishop, which have become much powerful on b7 now. So after pushing c5, here white played rook to d1 and black plays knight to b6, perhaps even breaking with the d5. So after knight to b6, here white played g3. The idea is very nice. White wants to put the bishop on h3, and the bishop on h3 would be which would be like next level powerful, would be like a beast. So after g3, black played king b8, keeping the king safe, and here comes knight to a5, directly going for the bishop on b7, because the bishop on b7 is very powerful. That's why here after knight to a5, black played bishop to a8, preserving the bishop on a8, and actually the knight on a5 is not doing much, but the knight is controlling very main squares on b7 as well as c6. So knight is very well placed on a5. So after bishop to a8, white played bishop to h3, and now the bishop is very powerful on h3. And here black decided to open up the position by playing d5, and here white gives check on f4. Here comes king a7, and here simply white developed his last piece by playing rook h to e1. And now white, all pieces have been successfully developed, and now white has to see what will black do. So after rook h e1, white threat is very nice. He wants to capture the pawn on d5, and his rook would be open, attacking the queen on e7. That's why after rook h to e1, black decided to push the pawn to d4. Here comes knight to d5 by Garry Kasparov. Here comes knight into d5, and now e into d5. And here black cannot capture the pawn on d5 because the queen is hanging on e7. So Topalov decided to play queen to d6, going for the queen trade. And now comes a fantastic move by Garry Kasparov, which is very hard to find by a human, which is rook into d4. Wow, very nice move by Garry Kasparov. If I would be on a black side, the most human move looks like to capture the rook, which was played in the game. But the best move according to engine in this position is to play king to b6. And the idea of king to b6 is the rook is not going anywhere. The rook is still being attacked. Second, the king is also attacking the knight on a5. So the best and the logical way to defend the knight is to push the pawn to b4. And here the best move for black is to capture the queen on f4. Here comes rook into f4, and now comes knight into d5, capturing up a pawn and also attacking the rook on f4. So now come rook into f7. Here comes c into b4, a into b4, and knight into b4. And now the king is attacking the knight on a5. So knight have to obviously move from the a5 square. And now comes knight to b3. And here comes rook to d6, rook to e6, rook into e6, bishop into e6, and this position is equal, and perhaps it would be nice for black in this position. But after rook into d4, the move which was played, okay, this move is very obvious, natural, which comes c into d4, which is the most human move. And the sacrifice is not over yet. Many of you were thinking, okay, now perhaps queen will capture the pawn with a check and there would be some ideas. But no, this is not what it looks like. Now comes the epic move by white, which is very hard to find. Here comes rook to e7 check by white, a very fantastic move by Garry Kasparov, sacrificing his second rook. It is epic. Black can't capture the rook basically because now it's made in 4. Here queen captures the pawn on d4 now. With a check, the king is forced to go to b8, and now comes queen to b6 check. So the king is having no squares because the bishop is also controlling the c8 square. So the bishop is forced to come in between to b7, and now comes knight to c6 check, and the king is forced to go to a8. And who requires the queen when we can checkmate black king? By playing queen a7 and it's a checkmate, the knight is protecting the queen. So that's why after rook e7, black cannot capture the queen, capture the rook. That's why here Topalov moved the king from the a7 square to b6, which is the most natural move. And now comes queen into d4, capturing up a pawn and saying, okay, I want to sacrifice my knight too, so please grab it. So Topalov captured the knight. And here comes b4 check by Garry Kasparov. White is forced to go to a4, and now comes queen c3. The idea is very simple. Here white wants to play queen b3 and it's a normal checkmate. So to defend the checkmate, here only move is to capture the pawn on d5, which was played in the game. The basic point is now the queen is covering the b3 square, so now there is no checkmate by playing queen b3 checkmate. So after queen into d5, here white played rook to a7. The threat is to capture the a6 pawn and now it's a checkmate. So black played bishop to b7, the most natural move, and here comes a nice move by Garry Kasparov, capturing up the bishop, saying that, okay, do you want to grab my rook? I will grab your king, and it's a checkmate. So that's why queen cannot capture the rook on b7. So in the game, queen c4 was played, trying to exchange the queens, and here white cannot trade the queens because after queen trade, white is just rook down and he will lose the game. That's why queen trade is not possible, and in the game Garry Kasparov played queen into f6, the most natural move, and it's also a very powerful move. The idea is to simply capture the pawn on a6 and now it's a checkmate. So in this position, Veselin Topalov captured the pawn on e3, which was a blunder. In this position, he should have played rook to d1 check, which is much more nice. Because after king b2, here comes rook to a8, protecting the pawn on a6. Now the queen can no longer attack the pawn, and if the game goes on from this position, if white plays queen b6, trying to checkmate black king on a5, now comes a very powerful move, which is queen to d4 check, and white is forced to trade the queens. So after queen into d4, rook into d4, rook into f7, and the only move for black which equalizes the position is a5, pushing up the pawn. Because after bishop to e6, now white is threatening a checkmate, but after a into b4, bishop b3 check, the king is having a room for king, and it's an equal position. So this could have been played by black, but I think he must be very afraid in this position as the king looks terribly weak, and he fall for the trap that Garry Kasparov wanted. He captured the pawn on a3, and now comes queen into a6 check, king into b4, now comes c3 check. A very hard move, a tremendously hard move to find for a human. c3, saying, okay, giving a free pawn doesn't make any sense, right? Here black is having two options. He can grab the pawn with the queen and the king. In the game, Veselin Topalov captured the pawn with the king, which was the right move. If he would have captured the pawn with the queen, now comes a very powerful move, queen into b5 check, king to a3 is forced, and now comes rook a7 check. Queen is forced to come in between, and after rook into a5, it's a checkmate. That fight can no longer be possible. That's why here comes king into c3 was played, and all those who were thinking what after king to b3, now comes queen a2 check, king into c3, queen to b2 check, king to d3, and now come rook to e7. And the plan of white is very nice. The rook covers this square, the queen covers this square, so basically king can no longer go to any square, and white threat is very simple. He wants to play bishop f1 and it's a checkmate. So the fourth move for black is to play queen c2, give up the queen, and eventually it would be lost because white is a queen up. That's why after c3, king can also not go to b3, so he decided to capture the pawn on c3, which makes the most sense. And after king into c3, now comes a very powerful move by Garry Kasparov, which is queen to a1 check. Here comes king to d2, queen to b2 check, king to d1, and bishop to f1. The move which Garry Kasparov played was the only move which can make the game winning for white in this position, and except that move, every move is losing for white in this position, and black would be completely winning. But tremendously, Garry Kasparov found the move which is bishop f1. Wow! The idea of playing bishop f1 is, here white wants to cover this d3 square because then it would be a check and the king is forced to go to the a file, and black will simply get rook a8 check and it would be game over for white. That's why bishop f1 was the one-man show. It was brilliant move by white. So after bishop f1, here comes rook to d2, a very nice move by black, which is forced because Black is saying, okay, you can grab my queen, I'm going to grab your queen as well, and after king into b2, b into c4, it's an equal position. That's why it cannot be possible. And after rook to d2, sorry, I've shown the move by mistake, but if you haven't found the source, but if you haven't seen the move yet, feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for white in this position. I will give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so to all those who have found the right move, congratulations on finding the only single move which wins for white in this position. And except that move, the game perhaps goes equal or it would be winning for black. So the right move is rook to d7, a fantastic move played by Garry Kasparov. Wow! The main idea of white is here the rook cannot capture the queen because the rook is pinned, and the second threat of white is that bishop is attacking the queen on c4, and the third plan of white is, sorry about that, the rook and queen is threatening the rook on d2. So the fourth move for black in this position, which was played in the game, is to capture the rook on d7. And now comes bishop into c4, here comes b into c4, and white simply captured the rook on h8 with the queen. And a couple of more moves were played, and this is completely winning position for white. After rook d3 comes queen a8, here comes c3 check, queen a4 check, king e1, here comes f4, f5, king c1, rook d2, and after queen a7 in this position, after move number 44, Veselin Topalov with the black pieces resigned the game, and Garry Kasparov with the white pieces won the game. A very brilliant and extraordinary game played by Garry Kasparov. This game shows his level, that he is obviously eligible to be the world chess champion. The game he played was just completely fantastic. The moves he found were not at all a human moves, but as it was a on the board tournament, it was completely amazing by Garry Kasparov. So guys, if you also like this game, then please like to my video. If you are new to my channel, then please subscribe to my channel. Share this video with your friends and family members. Thank you for watching, and I will come up with these new videos for you. So till then, please stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.